what has happened, Ukrainian drone attack on Russian oil refinery. This is one of the most important and one of the Russia's most important refineries in the south. And it seems that I don't know if it's still burning there, but it was a huge, massive explosion there. What is going on in the conflict on the battlefield that Ukraine has needed to do this?
Well, let me turn the question around. They do that. So what does it do to Russia's military capability? Does it weaken its ability to deploy soldiers? No. Does it weaken Russia's ability to launch more attacks with drones, with fabs, with missiles? No. This is PR. This is attempt by Ukraine to try to portray Russia as, oh, Russia can't stop us. Yeah, you can blow up a refinery, you can attack an oil facility here and there, and Russia repairs it. It's not taken out permanently, but that's not. It's not like Russia sits there and it's got, this is our only oil refinery. They cover 11 time zones. They have oil facilities throughout Russia. So Ukraine, by doing this, is just, I think, increasing the resolve of the Russians to destroy Ukraine. Yeah, because that's the only way this is going to end, with the complete, utter defeat of the Ukrainian military and either the death or capture of its current leadership.
We had an interview of Lavrov on MSNBC. We talked about it before, but they brought up some critical issues when it comes to Ukraine, and one of them is one of the most common rhetoric in the West, in the mainstream media, in terms of killing civilians.
Mm-hmm.
Here is what Lavrov said.
Mr. Foreign Minister, here are the facts. Close to 50,000 civilians have either been killed or injured in this war. Russia has hit maternity wards, churches, schools, hospitals, a kindergarten just this past week. So either the Russian military has terrible aim or you are targeting civilians. Which is it?
Look, NBC is a very respectful structure, and I hope you are responsible for the words which you broadcast. I ask you to send us or to publicize the information to which you just referred, because we never targeted the civilian targets of the kind you cited. You might be mixing, the information, because it is a fact that quite a number of churches were purposefully hit by the Ukrainian regime. Quite a number of just civilian settlements, human settlements.
But what about your actions? What about your actions, Mr. Foreign Minister?
Look, we're going by circles. I told you already what we mentioned repeatedly, that we never target civilian sites, that we only attack the sites which are directly involved in the Ukrainian military machine, which the West is trying to beef up. And if you have any proof of what you just said about churches, kindergartens, schools, and so on and so forth, I challenge you, make it public.
Sure.
Make it public with the dates, with the addresses, and so on and so forth. As I said, it's NBC is a very reputed broadcasting agency, and it is
absolutely. It's all publicly,
your
Mr. Foreign
listeners
Minister. It's
and
all
watchers
publicly documented,
deserve
and we
to
have
have
reporters on
some
the ground who've
specific
seen it with their
information
own eyes.
when you make such claims.
Yeah, it's all publicly
projection. This is the same crap that the Zionists did in the aftermath of October 7th. Oh, Hamas killed 40 babies. They beheaded 40 babies. And I said, back then I said, really? What are their names? grandparents who have grandchildren walk around with their pictures and talk about them. We didn't see one grandparent come forward mourning the loss of their grandson or granddaughter then. And similarly here in Ukraine. This is Western projection. During World War II, in Vietnam, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, who was bombing and killing civilians? Sadly, my country. It was during the entirety of World War II, you never had the Soviets carry out a massive bombing raid on Berlin or Dresden or München or Stuttgart or Hamburg. That was the United States and Britain bombing and killing civilians. Russia, throughout its military doctrine, and it goes back over 80 years, at least in war, they're not killing civilians directly. They're not lining them up and putting them in pits and shooting them. Oh, that would be the Germans. Yeah, so this is Kirsten Welker is just, she's been a mouthpiece for Ukrainian propaganda. Because, as Lavrov was saying, really? Okay, give us the dates, list the casualties, because one of the things Ukrainians are really good at is they'll make these claims, get the Western all inflamed, but they never actually provide supporting evidence. I guarantee you that if Russia dropped a bomb that killed 100 actual civilians, the Ukrainians would have their bodies laid out, there'd be photographs, you know their names, etc. You don't get that. Not at all. It's like what happened with Bucha, where the Brits actually brought in bodies from other places, placed them on the street. They were dead Ukrainians that had died from Ukrainian action, not from Russian action. But then they blamed it on the Russians. So this is it's just part of the smear tactic. This is why I maintain that Donald Trump may be sincere about wanting to negotiate a peace with Russia, but it's not going to happen. The media, the establishment is too deeply committed, embedded in this notion that they've got to destroy Russia. And whether they do it overtly, covertly, with deceit, they're not interested in, hey, let's sit down and come to a peace agreement. Let's give Russia the security assurances it needs that we, NATO, are not going to continue to build up our menacing force on their western border. This is going to end in a war. There's no, I don't see any way to avoid it personally.
We've learned that Donald Trump is going to send short-range missiles to Ukraine.
Yeah. Hey, I'm all about peace. I'm going to send some more missiles. Turn the tables around. If Russia was sending missiles to Mexican drug cartels or sending missiles to Venezuela, you think the United States would go, oh, shucks, they don't mean it? Nonsense. Trump needs to, the old expression is shit or get off the pot. He needs to figure out, is he about peace or not? If he's about peace, stop the flow of weapons, stop the flow of intelligence, stop the flow of money, and say, no, we're not going to continue to enable this. But he doesn't do that. He does the opposite. And it's not just short-range missiles, what they call, I guess, the enhanced range attack missile, the ERAM. It can go up to 400 kilometers.
Paul, you wrote a new piece on your website. You said that maybe there is something at the end of tunnel, some sort of light at the end of tunnel. How do you see this situation? Is there any sort of hope in what's going on between the United States and Russia?
Well, Nima, I didn't write that piece. That was a piece written by a Russian geopolitical expert for the website. I thought we had a lot of explanations coming from people in the United States. And I asked him, could he provide one coming from the Russians? what they made of all of this, because as you know, and we talked about, we were getting a lot of optimistic statements out of people like Witkoff about how accommodating Putin was to Trump, and was willing to trade land, and was willing to have some sort of NATO security guarantees to Ukraine and all of that. It didn't make any sense to me. And so I asked him and what the Russians thought. And he said that Putin's position was clear and unchanged. There would be no land swaps. They're not going to have Ukraine in NATO just by refusing to admit that he was a member, that Ukraine was a member, and that the Russian position was what it had always been, period, and that he expected that would prevail. And I do too. I think that the Russian position, it's the only one. It's the only one that makes any sense. And as Putin and Lavrov have stressed for years, you have to address the root cause. And ending the conflict, it doesn't address the root cause. And we've talked about it before. The root cause is the absence of a mutual security agreement and NATO being on Russia's border. And that makes the Russians feel insecure. And so the root cause is insecurity, and the solution is to remove the insecurity. This, I think, will eventually happen once Putin realizes that he made a mistake and letting the war drag on so long. He was trying to avoid alarming the West by having a quick, convincing victory. But the result was different from what he had hoped. The result was it drew the West more and more into it, and created more and more constituencies in the West for the war, and so on. So if we look, Niemer, at the recent developments, it's almost as if Trump has come to the conclusion that as Zelensky is so resistant, as Putin is inflexible on his position, that the best way for Trump to get out of it is for Russia to hurry up and finish the job. In other words, what he told Netanyahu, hurry up and finish the job in Gaza. We're tired of being embarrassed by it. Well, I think I think maybe he's taking the same approach to Ukraine, and he's just hoping that Putin will hurry up and finish the job. Because once all of the Russian territory is taken by Putin, he's met his war goals, and so then the question is, how big shall the buffer area be? And that will be up to Ukraine to avoid some ever larger buffer area, which eats up more and more of Ukraine, by coming to their senses and saying, yes, you're right, we should be friends with Russia. Ukraine was part of Russia for most of our existence, and we don't need to be at odds with Russia, and make a sensible solution. That then puts all kinds of pressure on Washington and the West to join in by saying, well, we don't really need to be at war with Russia either. Let's get NATO off the borders. So something like that, Nima, could happen. I mean, that's very optimistic, but that is a possible scenario. I don't particularly give it a 50-50 chance or anything like that, but it is something that that could happen. You know, the other the, the other kinds of solutions are difficult for Trump. For example, Trump cannot jettison the military security complex. The military security complex is present in almost every American state, either as a military base or as an armaments manufacturer. So they have tremendous influence with the governors and with the congressmen and senators because they're represented in their states, and they're also very important campaign contributors. And so if Trump took the approach we've talked about in the past, which is he just cuts off the weapons, cuts off the money, cuts off the diplomatic support, then Zelensky hasn't any alternative but to come to terms with Putin on Putin's terms. But if Trump does that, then all of these senators, Republican and Democrat, and congressmen and governors who are dependent on the military security complex, not just for jobs and taxes in the states, but for campaign contributions, they're going to get all over Trump's back. And it's going to cause him all kinds of problems. So you really can't do that. It's a constraint that's too big for him to challenge. So that sort of approach, which is the simple and most direct and most assured to work and get the thing over with, he can't take that approach. It's just ruled out. And then again, we have what we've talked about, the American hegemony doctrine. This is an institutionalized doctrine. And when Paul Wolfowitz gave expression to the doctrine, I think 1991, remember this doctrine, it was accompanied by the 7 countries in 5 years. So what Wolfowitz was really talking about was not just America's hegemony, but Israel's in the Middle East. Because what this doctrine, the purpose of this doctrine was to send the American forces at work clearing out opponents to greater Israel. And so we got rid of 5 or 6 countries for them. And we don't know whether we'll be involved in getting rid of another 1 or 2, such as Iran. So that doctrine is there. And if Trump could somehow get enough members of the House and the Senate and his appointees, and they could all say, this doctrine is in the way of peace. How can we be seen as peacemakers, especially by Russians and Chinese and Iranians, when we have a doctrine